So, when it comes to Cuba in particular, Canada likes to position itself as different from the United States, and particularly in relation to the embargo. There's the US embargo on Cuba, and Canada has consistently voted against that in international institutions. So, but I think this really sort of stems from, in a way, a misunderstanding of the difference between broad based sanctions and targeted sanctions. A country can have global affairs can take a position that's against broad-based sanctions in general, or in particular when it comes to Cuba, but can still be very much in favor of imposing targeted sanctions when they're appropriate to sanction human rights violators.
Which is what Magnitsky sanctions are. They're very targeted.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Michael, what do you feel Canada should be or ought to be doing to support freedom in Cuba? We're a democratic country. Shouldn't we be supporting more democracy everywhere? Isn't that the right path? Well, what should we be doing in Canada?
Canada should take a closer look at what's happening in Cuba, get information from human rights defenders. October of this year has been the month with more protests, even more than July 11, 2021. So Canada should take a closer look. The constructive engagement policy that Canada has had with Cuba since 1994 has not worked. I understand that back then, when Jean Chrétien was prime minister, there was an idea, a certain concept of a foreign policy of bringing up human rights topics behind closed doors. That doesn't work with dictatorships and authoritarian regimes in general. The way that all the countries should approach the issue is by publicly condemning what is happening. And since the foreign policy of Canada has not created an open society in Cuba, or at least it has not contributed to human rights, we think it should change. And one of the ways it should change is with Magnitsky sanctions. Prime Minister Trudeau and the Minister of Foreign Policy have already made statements against repression on July 11, 2021, but they have not taken any action. So we believe that with the Magnitsky sanctions, that would be the right step. It's a matter of justice for the people of Cuba. In Cuba, people don't have any access to an independent judiciary or an independent media, so they are defenseless. And then the international community, and Canada in particular, can play a key role. As Sarah was mentioning, the US has already sanctioned all those officials except Diaz-Canel, with Canada as approving in case they accept to go ahead with the sanctions. It would be working in alliance, as human rights organizations point out. Democracies work better when they unite against authoritarian regimes around the world, in this case, the Cuban dictatorship.
And I want to point out, Sarah, that I don't know if this is an honor or not an honor for you. I would consider it an honor, but you are one of the Canadians to be named and banned from Russia and from entering the country of Russia because of what your outspoken positions on human rights. What do you make of that?
I think it's an honor. I consider it a badge of honor for sure that my work has enough impact that Russia is taking notice.
So will Cuba do something similar? We were saying that they're sharing notes with other authoritarian regimes. Will they start banning people from entering their country? I mean, obviously there are limited travel already within the United States. Many Canadians flock to Cuba, Sarah, for vacations. Is that the right approach?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to predict that. That's not something that's consistent across the authoritarian regimes. With China, for example, I'm sure if I went to China as well, I would be arrested pretty quickly. I've actually done more work on China than Russia, but I'm not on a public list. They don't really tend to do that. So I'm not sure what Cuba would make of whether or not to publicize a blacklist or not.
And go ahead, Michael, you want to chime in?
Yes, they already have a blacklist. They don't publicize it as Russia does, but there are many human rights activists that cannot go back to Cuba. One of them, even though the penal code says that if you work outside of Cuba to defend human rights and support people inside, you have legal consequences. And there are even activists in Cuba that are banned from leaving the country. So that's going on in Cuba as well, even though they don't publicize it.
It's true. You can only leave the country with permission in many cases. Is that correct?
Yes.
My goodness. Well, I mean, we have to have hope that things will be better. Hopefully we'll see some Magnitsky sanctions imposed. But thank you both so much for joining me. We're going to follow this issue because this is something I think we really need to shine a light on. So thank you both very much today.